Hello, and welcome to our Spring Family Weekend Parent to Parent Global Education Oregon presentation. My name is Tiffany Fritz, and I'm the Director of Parent and Family Programs. In just a moment, I will introduce our two presenters. You are joining us via Zoom webinar, so there is no need to worry about muting your microphone or turning off your camera. And just so you know, we will be recording this session, so families who are not able to participate will be able to get all of this amazing information later. As we go through this session's information, we ask that you jot down any questions that you have in the Q&A box below. We will leave time at the end to address your questions. If we are not able to get to your question, we will leave our contact information so you can reach out to us individually. And with that, I'd like to introduce our presenters from the Division of Global Engagement. Lisa Caravelli is the Assistant Director of Institutional Relations, and Michael Price is the Health, Safety, and Risk Manager. And with that, Lisa and Michael, take it away.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. It's great to be here, and thrilled that we're seeing so many of you out there who are interested in learning more about what potentially could be a really transformative experience for your students while they're at the U of O, but of course an experience that's going to be taken abroad. And we know that there are lots of questions that you probably have just in a regular year, let alone having sort of COVID-19 out there. So I'm so pleased to be joined by my colleague, Michael Price, who is, of course, Global Education Oregon's Health, Safety, and Risk Manager that Tiffany already mentioned. He'll be speaking with you in just a few minutes. So I'm, as I said, super excited to be here. I want to acknowledge that there are lots of balls in the air when your student decides to go abroad, whether that's, visiting with his or her academic advisor to see where a global experience might fit in his or her career path or academic path, to getting the application together, which although we've streamlined it considerably, can be, just yet another thing on the student to-do list that tends to get pushed down a bit. And I should say, before I go any further, that although I've been working in the Division of Global Engagement for 7 years and with our study abroad programs for that time, I'm also the mother of a U of O student who went abroad. So I've seen this certainly from the side that you'll be seeing it from, that is the parent side, as well as the professional one. So yeah, all sorts of balls in the air, things I've already mentioned, even just managing details of travel in this current environment. It's a lot to think about. And when you add that to the very exciting but also challenging situations that a student can be involved in when he or she is abroad. I mean, thinking about learning, a new language possibly, or a new culture, assimilating into that culture, meeting new people, making new friends, keeping up with coursework when, all sorts of experiences might beckon. There's a lot there. And then, as you can see from the screen, there's a lot that happens even after that experience, where we're going to hopefully walk you through some of the ways you can support your student. Because at GEO, we don't think of a study abroad experience as something that sort of just happens abroad. We think of it in almost kind of a life cycle, the before, the during, and the after. And in fact, the after part is where your student's going to have to come home and with, presumably new skills and new perspectives, try to fit back in. There is something very real when we hear the phrase reverse culture shock. It is very much something to be thought about and managed. But sometimes even more challenging for the student is the need to distill these incredible experiences down to something that can be communicated to family and friends, and frankly, even potential employers. And that's a really big part of how we can help them. We want to help them get abroad. We want to help them stay abroad and stay safely, and have that be an experience that's a valuable one from an academic standpoint, a personal, even a professional standpoint. But we really do, I think, give as much of our support to that student when he or she comes home. So I just wanted to kind of walk you through a few of those things. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. That is why the parent support is such a critical part of the study abroad experience. We're going to offer you some facts and some tips and some reminders. And then Michael, who you see on the screen right now, will join us specifically to talk about some FAQs, some frequently asked questions around COVID and around just health and safety in general, because we've got some new guidelines to share with you, new as of even this past Monday. So it's just a great time to join this event and this webinar and learn more information so that you have something to talk to your students about. So with this great sort of assembly of photos on the screen. I smile you can't see me smiling, but I am smiling. I just look at all these students and I think about all of their stories. And I think as a parent, whether you yourself had a study abroad experience in college, or whether you didn't, maybe your student is a first generation student and the idea of them going abroad as part of their 4-year degree plan sounds challenging or perhaps even scary to you. We're here to answer those questions, not only for your students, but of course today for you. I want to go through these again before, during, and after points just a bit more in detail, as I've given you somewhat of an overview already. The thing about study abroad is that, of course, your student, like when he or she goes to college on that first day, is about to embark on an experience that is going to, for it to be successful, going to require great growth and independence and self-reliance. But as we, I think, all know, with students in a university or at college, there's a little bit of them that still very much thrives with parental support, as much as they want to think that they're good without it. And that's no different when it comes to studying abroad. They're going to appreciate your support and your encouragement along the way, and they're gonna need it. And it's great to be part of the process. It's great to be on the sidelines of the process, whatever is most comfortable for you, for your student, and for that general family fit. But the purpose of what we're doing here tonight or this afternoon is to give you a sense of what's going on in the background for your student as he or she is thinking about this experience, doing this experience, and then returning back home from this experience, so that if he or she is not maybe sharing with you as much as you would like, you kind of still have a sense of what's happening at each of those or during each of those phases. So one of the things I want to just mention right off the bat certainly is that it's study abroad has evolved. And again, if you are someone who has personally had this experience, or even if you are not, and that's certainly fine, we understand that students are coming from all kinds of different experiences and family backgrounds, and regardless, their experience would be different anyway for those of you who perhaps have had a study abroad experience yourselves. But what I'm trying to get at here is that we see very much nowadays the idea of studying abroad as key to students' major or minor and really professional development. So the days of going abroad to enrich oneself, while a lovely idea in theory, and certainly a part of any study abroad experience if a student is immersing in a culture and engaging with that culture. But many students are much more pragmatic, and many families are much more pragmatic, and understand that with the cost of a college education, it's important to keep that student on path to degree. And a study abroad program can very much do that. It can for many students, satisfy core ed requirements, or again, major or minor requirements. So many of our programs are keyed to specific disciplines on the U of O campus. And in fact, the advising we do in our office or remotely at this moment is very much centered around the student's academic experience. Where are you in your degree program? Where do you want to be? Are you in a program that's highly sequential, highly rigid, perhaps a STEM field, where perhaps a study abroad experience during the academic year might not make all that much sense because you may miss out on a class that you need a prereq for some other class, down the road, and that might put you behind. We think about telling that student to explore summer options, for example, shorter term programs, so that they can keep on path to degree. And while they're abroad, if that's in the summer, in the case of the STEM students, still perhaps take classes or get research experience or do field work in their field, so that they're coming back with credits and getting ahead in many ways of their academic program. We also tell the students, and sharing with you as well today, that a lot of what study abroad is and can be is about professional discovery. If you are the parent perhaps of a, let's just say, a business student, the idea of going abroad and seeing sort of what business looks like on a different continent, in a different country, a different time zone, with a different culture, a different language, fill in the blank, can be enormously eye-opening, and can also serve as a kind of leg up, if you will, down the road when your student is not only getting their resume together, but also applying for a job. And I'll get into that in just a second. Maybe on a related note, before I go there, we talk a lot about study abroad through the lens of sort of professional development through these things we call soft skills. And I've never liked that term. I think soft kind of implies that they're not as important as, what would be, I presume, sort of hard skills, but I would like to sort of beg to differ. We see a lot of growth in students who go abroad, and when they come back, a lot of the things that they've grown in are what are termed these soft skills. But again, they're incredibly important skills that translate to adult life, to professional life, in ways that I'm sure those of you listening will immediately sort of respond to. So there's skills like tolerance of ambiguity, right? Skills like being a much more astute observer of nonverbal communication. Imagine yourself in a city where you don't speak the language, and you're trying to navigate where to go, and kind of needing to, just by sheer body language, sort of understand someone's directions. Think about the problem solving skills and the kinds of skills that are gained in new situations abroad, and how you can translate those skills when you're in a professional environment. Think about the kind of skills your student will earn or learn abroad about learning to be comfortable with discomfort. And I don't mean physical discomfort. I mean just being comfortable with being uncomfortable. A lot of being abroad in a new culture and in a new situation can be very sort of decentering and unfamiliar, and that sort of living with that and sort of steeping in that and getting used to what that feeling is and managing that feeling, as I think we all know, can certainly be a skill that is valuable in a throughout one's life. Resiliency, cultural competency, global fluency. I mean, all of these things I think are concepts that are probably familiar, but I just want to reiterate that those are the kinds of soft skills that a lot of students find they're bringing back and that are highly translatable to a professional experience. And then, as I said, there's that kind of after. They come home, they've had an experience, and they want, you want to ask them how it was. You're obviously you're curious about, all the high points, and there were probably some low points too. And your student's going to struggle a little bit with figuring out how to tell their story, right? And how to tell their story to the most appropriate audience. Because the story that they're going to tell you as family or friends should be different than the story they tell their potential employer, right? And we actually work with students when they return. We hold what are called returning workshops, and we work with students to hone not only their resumes and how to sort of surface their study abroad experiences, but how to talk about those experiences in an interview setting, so that they're not talking about, the really cool trip to Barcelona they took, but they're talking about, experiences that will be, again, translatable to a professional setting. And I think some of those workshops are some of the most rewarding moments I've had in my career here at the U of O, getting students to understand that their stories are something that telegraph the things they've learned, and could essentially help them stand out in a pretty big crowd. I will mention just briefly, many of you might know this, but study abroad still is not something that is widely done across American campuses. 1 in about 10 American college students studies abroad during their 4 years. And that is actually a number that is quite a bit different here at the U of O. So we know that about 25% of every graduating class goes abroad. at some point in their 4 years here at the U of O. And so we're very proud of that. Internationalization is a key part of what this university focuses on. But again, thinking about the fact that, you know, the students are, whether it's 1 in 4 of their peer cohort or 1 in 10, that in and of itself, the sheer fact of doing this experience and getting this experience under their belt sets them apart. And the ability to, again, leverage that and surface that in resumes and in job interviews. Yeah, I just don't want us to undervalue that. It's an incredibly important way to make your student a really distinct individual. And of course, all of the wonderful things that just come along with that experience. So next slide, Michael. I think I'm gonna hand it over to you shortly, but what I want to do is look at some of these facts and tips and reminders that, oh, I didn't mention before you turn the slide to the next. One of the fun things about coming back, for those of you listening, you've probably been looking at this picture of a young woman in the upper left-hand corner who's wearing a sash. This is someone who went to Nepal and Italy, it looks like, and these graduation sashes are often something our study abroad alumni are particularly proud to wear on graduation day. They can buy them for about $35, not through us, it's through another organization, but we kind of give them the details. And just, again, kind of highlights something special about their experience at the U of O, the fact that they went, as in this case, this young woman went abroad twice. So anyway, next slide, please. I'm not seeing the next slide, but that may just be me, and I can start talking without it if I'm not seeing it, but I can. Are you all seeing some facts, tips, and reminders? Maybe I'll look in the chat. Yep, there we go. Sounds good. Looks great. So I've already gone through some of these points, and as I said, I want to hand it over to my colleague Michael in just a second, but I did want to reiterate the fact that study abroad is very much considered a high impact experience, educational experience. So in addition to the intercultural competencies that I've alluded to, the fact that your students certainly going to gain, you know, great confidence and independence in doing something like this, we know actually that through research and statistical analysis that actually study abroad is associated with an 11.4% increase in 4-year graduation rates, and actually a significant, somewhat significant decrease in debt load too. So yes, a high impact practice, highly transformational in many cases, you know, from a personal exploration standpoint to an academic standpoint, staying on path to degree or even getting ahead on your path to degree. And as I said, potentially also very valuable for professional development. So just to make sure that you understand, it's not that your student just applies to study abroad and that's it. We approve their application and say goodbye. We obviously are very involved in the process from the minute they open an application to, as I said, the time when they get back. So there are pre-departure orientations that your student will go through. But one of the tips that I think I'd like to offer here is it doesn't hurt for you to get informed with them before they travel. I'll just give you a personal experience. When my son decided he wanted to go abroad, he chose Australia. And when he did that, I thought, well, that sounds great. I, you know, didn't have any strong feelings either way. I was happy to see him taking the plunge and becoming one of those, you know, 1 in 4 students at the U of O that does take a study abroad experience. But he chose to go abroad spring semester of 2020. And in addition to, of course, COVID, you know, rearing its ugly head in March of that semester, requiring him and several hundred UO students who were abroad to, of course, be recalled home for safety reasons. I was thinking, honestly, as a parent, more about the fires that were raging through Australia in the early part of 2020, just as he was about to take off. And so, you know, I look back and think about this kind of ironically, I remember buying masks for him, thinking, oh gosh, there's been a run on masks in Sydney, and because of all these fires, and he'll never be able to find a mask. And, you know, I guess the mask came in sort of handy for other reasons as well. But my point here is that, you know, I started to pay a lot more attention to the news in Australia. And that's I think just a tip I would share with you, you know, just get informed about the destination where your child's going. You may have an interest in knowing more from a safety standpoint, just from a cultural standpoint, but any way that you can kind of involve yourself peripherally, because again, the student is going to want to feel that this is his or her experience largely. But I just found that that was something that I started to take an increasing interest in. So I just, but sharing that as a parent more than a professional in this case. I would also like to remind everyone that as much as you want to get involved in your students' experience, we can't, because of FERPA, talk directly to you. So any questions that we can't answer for you this afternoon, you certainly can go through your student and have them ask us. And again, as much as I've said, it's wonderful to stay informed and give your student that support and critical encouragement. It's also important to step back, give them space while they're abroad. They'll send pictures, they'll text you that they've arrived, but give them the space to explore this new world that they've entered. When I studied abroad, back in the ice age, it was before cell phones or anything like that. It was a good month, I think, before I actually talked to my parents by phone. This was back on a high school experience. And so I think we all have to step back and remember, we all have immediate access to our students, but maybe sometimes it's good to not take advantage of that access. So with that, Michael, I'm gonna let you take the reins and talk a little bit more about some of these other tips and then move into COVID. And then we'll be back on the other end to answer some questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lisa. As Tiffany introduced me at the beginning, my name is Michael Price, and I am the Health, Safety, and Risk Manager for the Division of Global Engagement. And I have a full-time position with the Division of Global Engagement, which GEO is part of. And I spend all of my time looking at international health and safety issues and ways that we can ensure that our students are able to travel abroad in a safe way and remain secure and healthy while abroad. This past year, as you can imagine, has been quite challenging. It's been very interesting, actually. And I've kind of become a resident international COVID expert, which is, well, it's a lot of fun, actually. Very interesting, lots of frustrations, but it's certainly a challenging job and one that I take very seriously. In my position, I work very closely with other people within the university. So we're not just here making our own policies within GEO about when and when we cannot travel. I work closely with the incident management team, which is responsible for managing the COVID response at the University of Oregon, and which is responsible for setting the developing all of the mitigation measures that are in place and setting the standards and protocols for our COVID response. They're also involved in our decision-making about whether we will or will not run a program. I spend a great deal of my time actually monitoring conditions in other countries and assessing risk for restarting programs. I do this in my regular capacity as well when we don't have COVID as the gorilla in the room to deal with. Now I'm very concentrated on COVID. In any case, just recently, we have made a decision and received approval for running more than 30 different programs in up to a dozen different countries. I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. But again, this was not a decision that we reached internally on our own, but was done in consultation with university incident management team, the risk management office, and the University Health Center as well. As always, we're committed to providing a safe and healthy study abroad experience, and especially in these times of COVID. One thing to keep in mind also is that while we do have several programs that have been approved for summer, is that it is possible, because we do monitor and we do want to have the correct response when conditions change. It is possible that programs can be canceled all the way up to the start date, and even potentially, as we saw last year, even after they started while students are abroad. One thing that is good is that if a program is canceled prior to a start date, that we do provide refunds if that program is unable to run due to circumstances that are beyond our control. So I get a lot of questions from students. Parents sometimes email me directly, and certainly people on campus are asking a lot of questions about the resumption of study abroad. First of all, if we are going to do it, and that's a question which, depending on when you can ask, can have different answers. But I think one thing that has been decided recently, which will make it more plausible and possible that we will be running study abroad programs this summer and on into the future, is that we are going to now require students to be vaccinated before they're able to travel abroad on study abroad programs. They'll need to have their final dose at least 14 days before their departure date. The university right now, in fact, has vaccination clinics on campus. In Oregon, at least, college-age students are eligible to be vaccinated. We're starting to try to remind them. The university certainly has been reminding students to try to get vaccinated. So this is something that we're starting to require. It's done not only out of concern for the safety of the student themselves, which we are concerned about, but also the safety of the group. And we're also very concerned about our impact on the host country where we're sending students, where they'll be having interaction with possibly instructors or people that they meet around town. Even though safety precautions are being taken, there's always the possibility of the spread of infection, and we want to reduce that possibility as best as possible. I will note that there are exceptions that can be made for people who have medical or medical conditions or religious beliefs that may prevent them from being vaccinated. But in some cases, it's out of our control whether or not somebody can actually study abroad without being vaccinated because of the requirements of the host country. Another question that comes up quite a lot and is actually one of our big points of concern because of its impact on how we're able to run programs is whether students are going to be required to quarantine when they go abroad. Up till now, that's been pretty much the standard, anywhere from 10 to 14 days, depending on the country. But now many countries are starting to look towards either seriously reducing the quarantine requirement or not requiring it at all if the traveler is vaccinated. So this is another very important point and something which works favorably for us as well. This will, I think, become increasingly common, especially as many countries will start requiring evidence of having been vaccinated to be carried on with the use of an app or another type of certification of your vaccination status. Another question that comes up is around testing. Testing up to this point is pretty much standard for almost anywhere you go. There's some countries which may be an exception, but generally you need to be tested before within 72 hours of your travel time, of your departure time. And it's sounding like this is probably going to still remain in effect, even for people who are vaccinated. And in fact, many countries are still having kind of a second test required after you arrive. The costs of these tests are actually not covered by the program cost or by the program insurance. So any pre-travel tests that need to be done or tests that are required upon arrival will be at the student's expense. The same for any testing that might be required when returning to the United States. The CDC has been requiring that people present proof of a negative test before entering the United States. That will be changing with vaccinations. They've dropped the quarantine recommendation when returning to the United States if you're vaccinated as well. So another point of concern, especially from a safety net perspective, is what kind of healthcare options are available during our study abroad programs. For one thing, we definitely will not be running programs in countries where the healthcare system will not be able to provide adequate coverage or care for people who've come down with COVID. If healthcare capacity is stressed to the point where it may be difficult to get the care needed, we are not going to those countries. Countries which have substandard healthcare systems are also not being included in possible travel destinations. We do include healthcare insurance, sickness and accident insurance in the study abroad fee when students are going abroad. And this covers all medical costs. There's no deductible, and as well as repatriation insurance in case somebody has to return to the United States for medical reasons. Another thing which I know parents would probably be interested in hearing is that we have a coverage for being able to provide family support to travel to the location. If a student is hospitalized, their family can travel from the United States to the location where they are to be with them as well. We do have coverage for COVID as an illness. However, testing is not covered, as I mentioned, if the student is not diagnosed as being ill. So testing is only included if someone has been diagnosed as having COVID. Other questions around safety precautions that we're taking while abroad. We must and do follow all requirements of the host country. All the countries that we're currently going to have standards which are as strict as or possibly more rigorous than what we have in the state of Oregon currently. And we also are following U of O protocols in terms of what to do if there is an infected student, providing student support during isolation, and those types of things. Masks generally are universally being worn everywhere that we go, certainly. And in any case, yes, we are wearing masks abroad. So each country that we're sending students to has its own set of rules that are meant to prevent this or slow down the spread of the coronavirus. And we do provide students with a comprehensive orientation prior to departure. It includes all of the information they need to know about going to another country, what to expect there, what to do in cases of emergency, and those kinds of things. And for COVID, we've built in a significant component to provide information to the students about the specific country that they'll be traveling to, and what kind of restrictions are in place and rules that they will need to follow, and what to expect around that. We also provide information about the actual conditions that are present in the country, what to expect there. And if possible, we also try to give them a little bit of a background on some of the cultural attitudes around COVID as well, which can vary from country to country. So actual countries that we have currently approved for travel to for students include the United Kingdom, Spain, Denmark, Italy, Ireland, Iceland, South Korea, Singapore, Israel, and France. Again, these are currently approved, and in each one of these countries, in most of them, there's more than one program available. It might be an exchange program where students can study at another university for a semester or a year. It could be shorter term programs that are led by University of Oregon faculty, such as we have in Italy, Spain, and the United Kingdom, where we actually have study centers with our staff, and where we're in control of the curriculum. And then there are also some cases where there's third-party providers, where students can sign up on a program which is not controlled by the University of Oregon, but we have approved travel to those countries, such as Iceland and, well, in this case, such as Iceland, Denmark also, where students can travel for credit, but it's with the University of Oregon's approval, but it's a program actually operated by a third party. Again, I'll emphasize that we have every reason to believe that conditions will continue to be favorable in these countries. However, if things begin to not look good, and if it looks as though conditions may turn unfavorable for when the students may be there, we may cancel a program. And again, any program fees paid prior to departure would be refunded. Finally,
I think this is the part where I would jump in, Michael, but
okay,
telling me that we want to leave at least 10 minutes for Q&A. And so since we're ending this at 4:50, I think maybe we should just start there and ask if anyone has a question. I've answered a couple in the Q&A as you've been talking. There's one right now for you in the Q&A, I've noticed. Looks like Kathleen's asking, will the host countries have the requirements for those interacting with our students to be vaccinated?
no. We are, in our cases, in circumstances that we can control, we are trying to get our staff vaccinated. However, if it's at a foreign university, we have no control over that, and we're actually ahead of the curve in most cases of in terms of vaccination rates. So, for example, in a country like South Korea, chances are that instructors would not be vaccinated. If a student studies in Israel, which has probably the highest, well, one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, chances are they would be vaccinated. UK instructors will be vaccinated.
So while we're waiting for other questions, I did throw a few of these up on the screen under just sort of general ones that we often get. You can read them at your leisure. If you have other questions, we're certainly here to take them. I would just note, when does your student apply for study abroad? There's no one answer to that, of course, depending on when they want to go abroad. But a lot of our application deadlines come up at kind of odd times of year. I've already answered a question about this in the chat earlier, and that is due often to academic calendars abroad that don't necessarily sync up with ours. And so some of our exchange partners, say New Zealand or Korea or Japan, have application deadlines that may seem earlier than you would be expecting, but that's required on their end. So just have your students start planning and plan early. And then in terms of the cost of study abroad, which is of course a really valid question and one we get all of the time from students, and I'm sure some of you out there as parents are thinking about it. Most of what a student has in their financial aid package is applicable to study abroad, certainly during the academic year. And there are incredible scholarships that we offer, and actually incredible scholarship resources within our office. And by that I mean people whose job it is to help our students work their way through that kind of morass often of somewhat complicated scholarship applications. I'm thinking specifically about our National Distinguished Scholarships. When I say that, for instance, students who are receiving a Pell Grant are automatically eligible for something called the Gilman Scholarship, which is up to $5,000 in study abroad funding, actually $8,000 if it's for a different period of time or if they study a critical language. So we have someone in the office who's dedicated to helping students with those applications, but then there are applications, scholarships, dozens of them, whether they come from the Department of Romance Languages, whether they come from a generous U of O alumni or donor who wants to see a student have an experience that they also did or perhaps did not. Please have your student go to our website, geo.uoregon.edu, and click on the upper left-hand part of that landing page where it says scholarships, and they'll spend hopefully hours looking at all of them. There's plenty there. We also have some planning scholarships. So if your student is, well, I don't know if you're on this webinar with a student already at U of O, or if potentially some of you have students would be incoming next fall. We have lots of freshman planning scholarships, so they can look at those as well. Seeing some other questions in the Q&A.
So another question about masks. I'll just respond to that. Yes, in Italy, in fact, yes. In fact, on all our programs, we do have plans for everyone to be wearing masks, and we will be providing masks.
And it looks like I have got a question from someone about a fall program in France, looking for estimates, seeing a budget sheet that might be out of date. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and probably just be better to follow up with you on that specific one afterwards. Michael, I don't know if you want to handle this one. I'm not sure quite how to explain it myself, but can you please explain the process for applying for the student visa at a U.S. embassy? I know some of our embassies are closed right now.
Is that I'm actually not involved in working with international students coming to the United States, so I'm not even going to venture a guess.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't mean to throw that one to you necessarily. I was thinking the same thing. So many of our embassies and consulates are closed or not taking student visa appointments right now. But I don't know if that's a question on behalf of an international student, or if it's a question from a parent thinking about a student who is a US resident wanting to go abroad and needing a visa because they'll be abroad for more than 90 days, for instance, in the case of Europe, the Schengen zone. So we can try to answer that better if you want to add a little bit more to the Q&A. Person who asked that.
If it is a student who's applying to go abroad, to begin with, in Europe currently, students do need a visa if they're going to be there for 90 days. If it's a quarter-length program, that it falls below 90 days, and so students do not need to apply for a special visa. But if it is a program which is semester length, generally it will be beyond 90 days. Especially if it's following a European academic calendar, or a year-length program, a student would need a visa for all European countries, and in fact, any country that they're going to go study in. We provide embassy contact information for students. Generally, countries that are open for students to study in right now have functioning consulates in the United States. I unfortunately cannot give you any anecdotal evidence about how smoothly that may or may not work, because the only students I'm aware of, we had some students go to South Korea at the beginning of winter quarter, and things went well for them, actually, in being able to get their visas. But in terms of other countries, I can only assume that since they are claimed to be open and functioning, that things will operate as usual.
So we have
sorry,
go
just
ahead.
Interrupted. My apologies. Lisa and Michael, I think Whitney's question will be our last one for this evening. And then any additional questions, if you want to email parent and family programs at myduckis, MYDUCKIS uoregon.edu. We will make sure to forward your questions on to Lisa and Michael so they get answered. So yeah, we'll go ahead and answer Whitney's and then we will close out.
Yeah, that's great. The question is, any recommendations on how many programs to apply for? Best chance to get into one, i.e. pick top 3. I wouldn't think of it as competitive as maybe your question is suggesting. I mean, if your student meets the GPA requirement, has the necessary language prereq, if there even is one, and submits an application complete, as requested, it's a fairly straightforward process to be accepted. So your student should pick a program that he or she wants to attend and assume that, barring some very strange surprise, that that's likely the program they'll be able to go on. So
can you just quickly hit the anonymous attendee question about canceling?
Yep, go for it. I say go for it.
You're more familiar with the cancellation policy than I am, Lisa. So.
Oh, yeah, I actually was hoping to think about that one, to be honest, because yeah, I was thinking, gosh, I'm glad we're gonna be able to answer that in a written form because I want to get all my ducks in a row there. So I'm gonna let Tiffany forward that to us.
Perfect. So it is from an anonymous attendee.
Oh.
So if we could, again, if you email your question to myduckis@uoregon.edu, I will make sure that this gets on to Lisa and Michael and that we respond to all of the questions that you might have.
And I just threw my email in the chat.
Okay, I'm not able to, just a minute. I'm typing my email address into the chat, that did not go to the chat. Thank you, everyone. I think Tiffany will send out our contact information.
I will for sure. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for participating. Thank you so much, Lisa and Michael. This was fantastic information. And yeah, one of my biggest regrets as a student was not taking advantage of studying abroad. So I highly recommend this. I highly recommend your student reach out to Global Education Oregon. And like I said, any questions, please feel free to email myduckis@uoregon.edu, and we will make sure these questions get to Lisa and Michael. Again, thank you so much and have a lovely evening.